All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Before we get started, I want to tell all of you thank you for your tremendous support. People are slowly but surely finding out about who we are and what we do. They enjoy and respect the passion with which we speak. But as we always say here at Chin Check Sports Radio, we do this because we love it, as are simply sharing our passion with you all as we continue to build our listening army to take over the world. We are moving right along with our Chin Check Sports Radio Top 10 Most Controversial Decisions of All Time in the sport of boxing, based on the fights that we grew up watching. And we gave you a little spoiler in the previous broadcast that we were going to discuss this particular fight. That brings us to April 22nd, 1995. Pitt's newly crowned heavyweight champion of the world, George Foreman, against unknown challenger Axel Schulz. So let's jump right into the career of George Foreman. January of 1973, a TKO victory in the second round in Kingston, Jamaica, to become the heavyweight champion of the world. And the TKO victory came at the expense of the late, great Joe Frazier. March of 1974, a TKO in the second round against the late, great Ken Norton Sr. to retain the heavyweight champion of the world. October 30th, 1974, a KO in the 8th round loss to the late, great Muhammad Ali, that you all known or might have heard as the Rumble in the Jungle. January of 1976, a KO in the 5th round, a victory over Ron Lau in a very exciting fight, actually. Sloppy, but definitely an entertaining fight. June of 1976, a TKO in the rematch against the late Joe Frazier. March of 1977, a unanimous decision loss against Jimmy Young in Puerto Rico, the fight that sent George Foreman into a 10-year retirement. So now some big fights after the career, after the first retirement of one George Foreman. We are going to jump right to 1990, a KO victory in the second round over one-time heavyweight contender Gary Cooney. Next big fight, and we definitely remember watching this fight, was April of 1991, a unanimous decision loss to Evander Holyfield. In a tough fight, I believe it was one round, the 7th or the 8th round, where Foreman was hit with just a flurry of punches, but definitely he never went down. In June of 1993, a unanimous decision loss against the late Tommy Morrison. If that name sounds familiar, go watch Rocky V. He was the antagonist in the movie of Tommy the Machine Gun. November of 1994. We mentioned this fight in the Chin Check Sports Radio Top 10 Upsets of All Time. A KO victory in the 10th round in a fight that George Foreman was losing on every scorecard, and it wasn't even close. And one of the most miraculous sporting things that you will ever see. George Foreman lands a quick 1-2, specifically the hard right hand to the jaw of Michael Moore. You saw Michael Moore just drop to the ground. He did not get up. And to this day, I think one of the greatest calls ever in boxing was Jim Lampley screaming, "It happened." He took a deep breath. It happened. That George Foreman became the oldest person to become the heavyweight champion of the world at the age of 45. So his first title defense was set up against Axel Schulz. Now, Axel Schulz was jumping to his career. The only notable fight before this fight they're getting ready to discuss is against fringe contender Henry Akinwande, long, rangy fighter out of Great Britain, who was of Nigerian descent. Again, was one of those contenders, fought guys in the 90s, but really didn't do anything. So, even going into this fight, now, during the comeback career of George Foreman was able to pick his opponents. Now, again, and I get it, being strategic, stepping up your level of competition. So Foreman knew how to pick his opponents during his comeback, during the first comeback, or during his comeback, I should say. And so he matched. This was another case of Foreman now picking his opponents once again. He is the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. What do you say about lineal? You trace the line, you trace the lineage of the man who beat the man who beat the man. So he knocks out Michael Moore, who beat Evander Holyfield, who at the time had regained the title from Riddick Bowe, who had beat Evander Holyfield, and then Holyfield had beaten Buster Douglas, who had beaten Mike Tyson. So again, the lineage, the lineal champion of the world. So George Foreman was the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. Now, in beating Michael Moore, Foreman won the WBA and the IBF titles. At that time, there was a split with the WBC, specifically when Riddick Bowe decided not to fight Lennox Lewis, and Lewis was crowned that champion of the WBC. So there was clearly a split. So going to the lineal, again, lineage of the championship, George Foreman was the guy. The problem is that Schulz was unranked by both the WBA and the IBF. Now, this is old boxing politics where guys was getting title shots because they were at least had to be a top 10 ranked contender. And for some reason, Axel Schulz moved up into being ranked in the top 10, but the WBA decided not to follow along with it. They wanted Foreman to fight somebody else, and Foreman refused, so Foreman was stripped of that particular title. So that brings us to this date at the MGM Grand, George Foreman making the first defense of his heavyweight championship of the world against a younger fighter, a guy who was a virtual unknown out of his hometown of Frankfurt Oder, Germany. I'm sure most other folks in Germany probably even know who Axel Schulz was. So let's jump right into the action here. In the first round, we gave the first round to Schulz, just being the busier fighter. Now, if you go back and watch older George Foreman and go back and watch the younger George Foreman, the younger George Foreman with the fro, the muscles cut up, he's obviously faster in his early 20s. George Foreman that came back, especially George Foreman into this fight, is now 45 years old. He's not as fast, clearly not as fast as he was. He didn't retain the same muscle mass. He was kind of the old, jolly old fat guy. But George Foreman was in great shape for a guy his age. He was in that good boxing shape. He still had a thick arms, and George still had the punching power. So again, when it comes to guys' punching power, they say that it's the last thing to go. While other skills might erode, others timing and reflexes and muscle mass and shape and conditioning, everything else might go, but the power is the last thing to go, and George Foreman still had power. So again, Schulz being the younger fighter, the quicker fighter, we felt that he definitely got off as being the busier fighter in the first round, so we gave the first round to Axel Schulz. Round two, we gave the second round to George Foreman by landing more harder punches. Now, even though Schulz was kind of pressing the advantage, but we felt that Foreman was actually slowing the fight down. Well, he did slow the fight down in that second round to do enough to actually land some hard clubbing blows. And that's how we effectively scored the fight. So we scored that fight, we scored the round, for George Foreman. So now the same thing started to play out. Schulz, younger, faster, started to kind of get off the punches first. Now, his punches really didn't hurt. He just was a very basic fighter. Jab, right hand, throwing the occasional left hook. But he wasn't prize fighter. He was a professional, and we felt that he definitely did enough to win the round. Again, slow, plodding George Foreman, throwing hard punches, but really picking his shots versus a guy who's actually a busier fighter. And in some cases, the event did not seem to overwhelm Axel Schulz. He actually was bringing the fight to Foreman. So we scored rounds 3, 4, and 5 for Axel Schulz. You could have maybe given a round to Foreman, but we gave that round to Schulz. We gave round 6 to Foreman. Again, landing harder clubbing blows. Schulz not being active enough, right? The activity starting to stop or slow down rather. So we gave the 6th round to George Foreman. We gave the 7th round to Axel Schulz. We gave the 8th round to George Foreman. Again, hard body punches, just, stopping, kind of when Schultz's attack kind of slowed down, so that's why we kind of gave that round to Foreman. We gave rounds 9 and 10 to Axel Schulz. Same thing started to play out. He's just getting off faster, just quicker hands, circling. He just peppering the champion, landing right hands. So it was just one of those that he was just peppering Foreman. He would just just getting off faster. He wasn't really able to hurt George because George had that cross-arm defense, and Schulz, quite frankly, didn't have the power to really hurt George. But again, boxing is about landing more punches, landing more effective punches, and scoring points. And at this point in the fight, and probably even some rounds before, you clearly saw some visible swelling over George Foreman's left eye. We scored round 11 for George Foreman and round 12 for Axel Schulz. So if you look at our scorecard, we scored that fight rounds 2, 6, 8, and round 11 for George Foreman. So that's 8 rounds to 4. Some people might score it 117, 111. That's 9 rounds to 3. So we have it 8 rounds to 4. You can maybe give another round to Foreman, but you'd be hard pressed to. So the official scorecards was one judge ruled the fight a draw, 114, and one fight had ruled in favor of Foreman, 115, 113, and Foreman won the fight by a unanimous decision. So watching this fight, you would have to give, well, at least what the judges did, you would have to give George Foreman 7 rounds. So 7 out of the 12 rounds, and you only gave 5 rounds to Axel Schulz. You kind of be hard-pressed to do it. That decision was very questionable. And again, we don't want to minimize what judges are watching, but now we're kind of getting into the part of this particular list. Now we're kind of wise ranked higher where what exactly were the judges looking at? Because Schulz was getting off. Now, what's funny, and it's only fair to bring this up, Larry Merchant actually had Foreman winning the fight. So if you go back and watch the broadcast, there were times where, of course, the unofficial judge, Harold Letterman, was scoring a fight for Schulz. And he, in fact, scored a fight 117, 111. As we mentioned, it's 9 rounds 3. But Larry Merchant, throughout the entirety of the fight, kept saying, well, we're watching a different fight, and I have George Foreman ahead. So he was liking the activity of what George Foreman was doing. So I can't, I don't want to minimize that, but I tend to agree with more of a Harold Letterman, as well as most other fight observers watching the fight, that we felt that Axel Schulz did enough to win the heavyweight championship of the world, and we felt that was a rather bad decision. We definitely agree with that, and that's why this falls into what in the world was the judges looking at. Because again, the speed of Schulz, now of course, formed a lot of good inside work, with maybe the occasional uppercut, that good thudding jab, some good rights to the body, but those things were far and fleeting versus Schulz was a faster fighter. He was getting off first. He definitely was catching George with some clean punches, even though George at times might land the harder punches, but Schulz was landing like the cleaner punches. So we felt that after Schulz, that definitely did enough to win the fight. So again, this is Chin Check Sports Radio. Next ranked fight as to what the judges were watching. Now, what was the aftermath? They ordered, and it's the IBF, the International Boxing Federation title, they ordered an immediate rematch between Foreman and Schulz. Foreman decided not to take the rematch, and again, now he's stripped of the IBF championship. So again, now you keep having splinters of the heavyweight championship of the world, and which resulted in his last fight, and we mentioned this fight previously, the fight against Shannon Briggs, that was his last fight. So it's one of those, definitely watching that fight growing up, definitely was a head scratcher to be like, what exactly were the judges looking at? Because, and we were emotional George Foreman fans. We definitely remember what we were doing that night when George knocked out Michael Moore. So, and thinking he's going to just roll this guy from Germany. But as you watch the fight play out, you're like, okay, Schulz is actually winning the fight. And we think he's done enough to win the fight. So that definitely fight had to make the Chin Check Sports Radio top 10 all-time most controversial boxing matches or boxing decisions based on the fights that we were watching. So again, we're having fun with this list. I know they're coming at you hard, fast, and heavy, and we're definitely going to keep on doing this. So definitely let us know what you think. And until the next time, Chin Check Sports Radio, signing out.